Okay, I see that we've just been live streamed. So let me say hello and thank you for joining us for the 2022 LD4 conference, Linking Global Knowledge. I'm Carrie May, and for this session, I'm going to be your facilitator and chat moderator, and I will do my best during this session, linking data across museum archives and special collections presented by Anne Flannery and Ling Chen, and followed by a Q&A. Before we get started with the session, please know that it is being live streamed, as I said just a minute ago. It's being live streamed to the LD4 YouTube channel and will be recorded and saved on YouTube for future viewing. I also want to highlight a few things on the slide that you currently see. I'll drop chat links into the chat later. We encourage you to take a look at the conference website for more information on sessions in later parts of the conference, as well as taking a look at the conference code of conduct. We're using the hashtag LD42022 on Twitter. Please take advantage of that. Please use the Slack invite link to join Slack as that will let you continue conversations from any sessions over in Slack, and enjoy that very much. We also offer a tech support channel in Slack for conference technology assistance. But if you experience any technical difficulties during this session, feel free to go ahead and pop that over in the chat in Zoom. Raise your hand, just let us know. You can also go to Slack, but we'd like to help you as fast as we can so you can get back into the session. Finally, during the session, please go ahead and put any questions you think of in the Zoom chat. Like I said, I'll try to answer some as we go along as best I can, but if we don't get to them, we'll get to them at the end in the Q&A session. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to our speakers. We have Anne Flannery, who is head of the OI Museum Archives at the University of Chicago and specializes in archaeological archival documentation and photographic preservation. Anne says, the goal of this session is to think about ways in which linking photographic data between archives and special collections improves collection care and increases discoverability. Ling Chen is a PhD candidate in the East Asian Languages and Civilizations Department at the University of Chicago. She is interested in developing a career in the archival and information sciences and is currently a summer intern at the Museum Archives of the Oriental Institute at the University of Chicago. Sorry about that. So I'll stop sharing and you can take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carrie. Let me just share the screen and get set up here.
Okay, I see it.
Perfect. So thank you so much for having us today, and we'd like to thank the conference organizers and everyone who's contributed to sessions up until this point. I know Ling and I have both enjoyed all the ones we've been able to attend. So I'll get started. Just a little point of reference. I'm going to go through the slides, and then Ling and I can both handle questions at the end. So here is a picture of the museum archives. For today, let me just have a note. I'm going to be referring to the OI. We're undergoing a name change, and so just for shorthand, we have dropped into just referring to our museum as the OI. The OI is an institute that includes a museum, as well as a special collections library and a part of the University of Chicago. It's Near Eastern Languages and Cultures Department. So there's a lot of different features to the Institute. So that's just sort of getting at how it's organized. It focuses on the study of the ancient Middle East and has been around officially for 100 years and sort of unofficially in different capacities for about 130 years. So it's interesting. The one thing we didn't do was, progress the slide. Okay, perfect. Just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to try to get through today. So our session is kind of geared towards people. We have who have databases that they are using in their institution, whether it's a smaller one like ours or a larger one across the university. And we are very interested in how we can link our data within the confines of our database, but we're also looking for new ways to think about sort of extra institutional linking that is possible either through Wiki or Sinopia or any of these sort of open source software. So it's been really helpful. The peer-to-peer learning and linked data session earlier today was really wonderful. So we're hoping for feedback from everyone here. So today I'm going to introduce the OI and its museum archives, kind of get back to sort of the physical collection and how to sort of scale things down when trying to link things internally, focusing on photography to do that, our collections management strategy, how we've tried to link data within our database already, and then the current project that Ling has been spearheading this summer, and then sort of our next steps and new questions that have arisen. So the museum archives, here's a little quick introduction to what's contained there, because I do think an archaeological and anthropological archive is interesting and a bit unique. As you can see here, here's a photograph from Persepolis, which was taken during the OI's excavations there in the 1930s. This is just one of many photographs that we have in our collection, archival photographs in our collection. In addition to archival photographs, we have director's correspondence, which tracks the correspondence of the director of the OI, even before the OI existed. So James Henry Breasted, the founder, back to the 1890s up until the present day, faculty papers, excavation materials, which are quite diverse, include that encompass excavations that the OI has undertaken in the 1920s, 30s, and up to the present day. Administrative documents, personnel documents, maps, epigraphic survey documents, which are not only photographic, but also drawings, dictionary projects like the Chicago Assyrian Dictionary, and then the OI photographic collection, which we'll get into, and some reel-to-reel film. So it's quite a diverse amount of information. This is just to bring all the archivists out there into a familiar home. This is what the inside of the archive looks like. Just a little background also to the space and sort of the organization of the archive. The Institute, in some form or other, has been around for a little over 100 years. But the archive itself was only known as an archive since around 1980, and it's only been in a centralized space since about 15 years ago. So, and it's only had a database for about 6 years. So this is just to say that the notion of the archive within the Institute is fairly new. And so when I talk about some legacy issues that inspired our linking data project, that's a little bit of the background to that. There's our processing area with a bunch of boxes, lest anything look too organized. And now I just want to kind of give you a little background information about the photography at the OI, because I know that when scaling something, even just deciding on a type of material is a large part of the project. So we have teaching collections that were gifted or purchased, as well as excavation collections. So that's what I'm calling original photography. Mainly it's photography that was taken by either members of the pre-OI, which was the Haskell Museum, or the OI itself, starting in 1919. So it varies across a lot of regions within the Middle East and encompasses excavations. So just to get a sense of the organization, we have an OI negatives collection, which is quite extensive and also something that we're trying to preserve physically, but we also have not a comprehensive digitized archive of that, but a very large digitized archive of that. And then there are excavation photographic records negatives within excavation collections. So when talking about the photographic collection, it's still quite dispersed throughout the archive. So focusing on the film, what kinds of film we have film negatives, we have glass plate negatives, lantern slides, reel-to-reel film, prints, and then 19th century albumen prints. So there's a lot of different kinds of preservation needs within the film archive, but also different kinds of materials to catalog. This is just an example of glass plate and film negatives, because they're kind of fun to look at, and an instance of a lantern slide, which is interesting. We have a lot of these. This is a very side note, but I'm curious what other institutions are doing with their lantern slides, if they have any. And then albumen prints, which we just had a large collection undergo some pretty extensive conservation. So before I get into sort of our database and our current project, I just want to kind of highlight other institutions that we've gone to for guidance. So the Field and the Penn Museum both use the same database that we use, which is Axiell's EU database. So it's been really helpful having similar content partners, sort of workshop ways that we can customize the database for our institute, even though we're doing different things. And then Saeed Chaudhry at Johns Hopkins Library and the Digital Research and Curation Center there. Up until recently has been incredibly helpful, just sort of brainstorming about ways that we can do this in a sustainable way. And our U Chicago Digital Collections Managers group, which is sort of a starting point where we've been talking about linking data and just what other people on campus are doing. And Loyola Chicago Public History and the Newberry Library have also been great advocates. So our integrated database, we're going to be kind of referencing what we call the IDB. It started around 2011. It's our ongoing effort to integrate all of the departments in the Institute into one database, which has been fairly successful. I understand that this is a unique thing based on sort of the size and capability of any sort of institution. It's reduced siloing of information and workflows internally, of course, but we are also now thinking about how to de-silo those things across those institutions, now that it's, or departments, now that it's better, but also extra institutionally. So we relate our information to departments much easier. It was funded by a series of grants from IMLS in 2-year increments, which have now ended. And so our improvements and upgrades are made in-house since 2019. And of course, everyone understands the trickiness of that. So we are looking at ways that we have a collection like ours that exists within a specific collection management system, and how can we feasibly and within a scope that a small staff can handle, distribute our archival materials more broadly. So just a little background to the Axiell database. One of the reasons, it's a museum database. So we do have a museum, but we have an archive, a special collections library, ArcGIS lab. We've integrated all of those departments into this. So we picked it because you can customize all these different kinds of departments into one database. So we use their solutions for many of these options here. And just to show you sort of what we look at when we go into the database, we do silo this according to groups. So the museum archive staff sees a certain number of what you see in the center there, which is a tower of modules. And then we have a specific layout using EAD fields to enter our specific information into the database. And then we can share that information across those internal silos. And you see down at the bottom different tabs that we use in order to report different information. This is our front end. Where you can search our collections online. You can search by those different departments with various fields. I'll show you a little bit more about what that looks like. For instance, here I searched relief, which of course came up quite a bit, and it'll display if there's an image, you have your metadata. You can refine your search by these facets here in pink. And then at the top, you see the museum collection, epigraphic survey, digital archives. That's a way that you can access different departments and the search that comes up for those through the website. So we have that sort of foundation, and at first we're trying to think about how to internally link our data to make it more accessible to the public, people who come into the museum. I think one thing that's sort of a blessing and a curse is we're always sort of trying to think about that physical world, the physical collection, and how that relates to seeing data online. And I think this is obviously really helpful, but it can also, I think, be a little bit of a stumbling block when thinking outside the box. But our first attempt at this was to think about the large museum items, the most popular or the most statement making that are in the museum, and try to attach archival documentation and photographic material mainly to those items in our catalog. So you see here, if you stare straight down this picture, the winged bull man, the Lamassu, otherwise known as the Lamassu, which is a very popular piece in the museum. There's an archival photograph of it. I think Ling asked the other day if the Lamassu might move somewhere else in the museum. And it was fun to tell her, no, it won't, because it was actually built into the side of the museum. As you can see through these archival photographs here, it's so heavy that they had to, this building was built in 1931. They waited to finish that wall so they could bring the Lamassu in, reinforce the floor, and build it or reassemble it there. So it's highly unlikely it'll ever move anywhere else, but I guess not impossible. So this is just to say we're looking at the museum collections item level for that relief, all of its metadata there, and there are 33 archival photographs that are linked to it. You can view that individual photographs record by clicking on View Digital Archive Record, which in the back end is our multimedia, which functions as a little bit of a dam. And here you start to get a little picture of all of the internal numbering that we're working with, and more of a description. And through that registration number, you can get back to that item level in the museum collection. So similarly, in the physical museum, on label text, you'll see archival documentation and photographs oftentimes. And we know that visitors not only want to learn more about that museum object, but sometimes they really enjoy how it was restored or seeing that archival documentation. So we're trying to fill that need by doing the same, for instance, the Tut statue that we have, and having archival photographs attached to that, outlining the restoration. You can see at the top that you can access all different kinds of department information about this statue. And again, there is the multimedia record where you can link back to the registration number. So this was our first attempt, and we've done it with some other large museum items. It's doing it for the entire collection, which is about 350,000 pieces, 3,000 to 5,000 being on display, is something that we've been slowly working through, but we're still struggling to just sort of see how we can better contextualize our archival images online. That catalog entry with an image is a great start, and linking to well-known artifacts is also a good start, but we want to create a flexible architecture that allows for adding information, updating our terminology, creating inclusive captions as we go along, because as everyone knows, when they're trying to plan out a database, you have to think very far ahead in the future, and we did not always foresee what we might want to do or need to do. Additionally, just getting back to that physical, we're solving an inheritance or a tracing problem. So those identifying numbers for the archival photographs traditionally were not included in citations from decades and decades ago. So this project that Ling is working on is attempting also to improve that tracing problem, which is to include better citations for publications, as well as every photograph tells a story, and this is becoming increasingly important in our archive, not just to preserve the physical images and to make the digital images visible, but to give more context about who was in the photograph, what kind of technology is in the photograph, of course, where the photograph is and what's being done in the photograph. Every photograph in our collection has all of these layers happening, and we have wonderful researchers who are contributing a lot of information to the archive, and we just want to be able to represent that online and enhance the rest of our collections in any way we can as well. So this is where our special collections library comes in. It's referred to as the research archives because we like to name things in a confusing way. There's a legacy for that, of course, but it is our special collections library, and Foy Scalf is our special collections librarian, the research archivist, and he is also the director of the IDB. So he's a huge resource for us. And together we've developed goals for linking our museum archives photographs to research archives bibliographic data. And Ling has outlined these here, which is discoverability. We want those identifying numbers to be more visible in general, which leads to their archival location being more visible. We want to create flexible descriptions so that we can not only clarify what's already there, but add additional information in the years to come, which publications often provide for us, or the research of those publications. And then greater contextualization seems to be a bonus that we're going to achieve, which is, as you'll see, you'll be able to understand what images are in a publication and have possibly more information about those images even after the publication is finished. But it also generates a bibliography for an image in our archive. So that's one of our next steps, is that you'll be able to see, well, that's one of our current steps actually. You'll see all the publications that an image is found in and all of the conversations surrounding that image. So we're just going to kind of walk through a case study, which is a recent wonderful publication by a wonderful scholar, Eric Klein, digging up Armageddon. He did extensive archival research for this, so it was the perfect example. And you can see here, this is just the front end bibliographic record for that book. And I just want to walk you through sort of the complex workflow that is involved in doing what we would like to do with our data. So for instance, someone opens up to this page and sees this picture of staff with everyone is identified, I believe. And this is negative number 9890. So this is our example, but there's no sort of identifying number. We don't know what collection it comes from. I mean, it's easy enough to find out, but we do have lots of instances in which people say, I love that picture on page 97 and I want a copy for my publication, or I want to learn more about that. And so we're trying to streamline that process as well. So when we're trying to grandfather in this workflow, so when photo permissions and the library receive a new publication for which a lot of archival material was presented, then they alert us and we have created an item level catalog record for that negative, along with a thumbnail, which is the digital archive record. This is the back end of that catalog record, just for reference. Then we have the front end of the digital archival record and the back end of that. So adding more information, we also find that sometimes our multimedia / digital archive record has more information than the item level record. So we're trying to combine our metadata information and descriptions for that as well. And then once Ling is able to attach those to each other, she then goes into the reference tab on the item level catalog record and attaches the bibliographic record as well as where this photograph is found in that book. So page 97, figure 22. This is quite a process. As you can see, once that is all complete, then it is published online as a view references for that item level record, and you can see all the publications we have for that photograph. So what we know about this process, we're working with different publications, so the associated photographs require specific adjustments. We're trying to streamline our workflows to adapt to those specific adjustments in order to just kind of decomplicate them. This process is helping us sort of create metadata and standardize our metadata, and we're hoping it becomes more efficient over time. But we're still feeling understandably entrenched in our database, and we're trying to think about even more ways to make these photographs connect with other institutions. So this process, the workflow is complex. It exposes the issues of our physical collection, which I think whenever working with databases, this happens. Our records aren't perfect, but we could wait until that happens to link them, but that would take a really long time. And so the originality of the archival data is also kind of prohibiting us from automating some things. So at certain points of the process, it does come down to just sort of that painstaking work of the individual cataloger or archivist. So we know that everyone struggles with this, which is one of our consolations. So I just want to show you what we're hoping to do as a next step, which we're back to this digging up Armageddon bibliographic record. And this is just the bottom of it. And what we hope to have going very soon is you'll be able to view museum archives items in this publication. So this will not only allow us to add information to archival photographs even after the publication is finished, but it allows us to have identifying numbers to sort of ease that tracing problem, at least going forward. Of course, we will also be insisting on certain citations, but in the instance that that doesn't happen or can't happen, we can add those later, and people will be able to sort of have a gallery of archival photographs. New questions are always popping up, of course. How do we streamline this process? Is there a way to streamline it? Being comfortable with sort of a slower workflow is also a reality sometimes. We don't want to create more issues that we will have to fix in the future. How can we link our data more broadly while working with the database that we are lucky enough to have? But it's still, we're always working within the limitations of that. And getting comfortable adding what we can given the limitations and the backlog that we're working with, as well as I presented it as, you know, we'll be able to add every archival photograph that appears in the book. Sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes we are dealing with preservation issues. So just being comfortable knowing that it won't be a complete gallery every time. And also in the future, we're interested in sort of gauging, just as the King Tut statue and the Lamassu are very popular and sort of iconic museum items in the museum, we're curious how images kind of become iconic as well, or if there's repetition in which photographs get used and why. So I just want to wrap up and leave time for any questions, or actually if people might share their experiences or give us any sort of advice. Like I said, that peer-to-peer learning and linked data session with Caroline was really helpful already. And just thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Anne. That was really interesting. And actually, I'm going to confess to the crowd that I missed giving the 5 minute because I was so interested.
Oh. Well, that's really nice.
I apologize. Haven't had any questions come through just yet, but I thought of one myself, and I'm curious about this. I understand that the project is about linking the physical items that you already have. Mm-hmm. If you got a new acquisition and it came with digital photos, do you have any plans for dealing with something like that?
Yes, absolutely. We do have digital photo numbers, and so we have a digital archive. So yes, if we get sort of new photos born digital or just sort of digital files from those, we do have the ability to kind of go through the same process with our database without dealing with the physical scans, of course. We're scanning the physical objects within our database.
So basically you're doing, at a base level, you're doing the same type of description for the digital images as you are photos.
Yes,
as exactly. The digitized items.
Exactly. They have different identifying numbers, but it's basically, yes, the same.
Trying to get you. Someone just raised their hand. If you have a question, if you would, go ahead and drop it in the chat area for me. We have a 147 participants, so getting to your name, it didn't pop up on the top there. There's a question. I don't know why I can't see it.
I see a couple of the questions in
I was going to say, I don't know why, but it's not coming up for me. I apologize.
I can read the questions that I see if that's helpful.
If you don't mind, I appreciate it very much.
Not at all. Joan asked, can you discuss your selection process for the processing of your analog images? And are you going systematically through bibliographic materials title by title, or is there a way of selecting how you work through things? Yes, thank you for that question. Selection process for analog images is, we have basically, there's a large amount of digital images from our analog materials already. So we are processing those into the database. And then with regard to new scans, because it is just me. And then when I'm lucky enough to have a part-time archivist like Ling, I have sort of focused on images that are required for publication, whether they're internal publications or external publications, or images that are in difficult physical shape. So we're dealing with a small amount of vinegar syndrome. So anything that needs to be isolated gets scanned. So it's sort of triaging from what is needed to be scanned for publication and then what needs to be scanned for preservation reasons. So going systematically through bibliographic materials, title by title, that has been an interesting selection, and maybe Ling can speak to that a little bit. But what we've done is start with, let's just say 2022's publications that have come out. We receive a copy of the book. So then we do this process for that publication, but also we're looking at sort of popular OI publications, whether they're from exhibits or we had a centennial a couple of years ago. So it was a publication with a lot of images in it. And so that's something where Ling has access to all the digital files in a discrete location and can start and practice this process in a more streamlined kind of way. Does that sound right, Ling? Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that's a great description. Like, I think we tried going through people's photo permission files to see like what pictures they use, but then it turned out that sometimes people request a lot of pictures and not necessarily publish them in the end. So I think it's far more efficient to just go through the final publication as a test case nowadays, like to do that first and see what kind of things we run into. Yeah, that's what we've been doing so far, but we are like considering how to expand that process a little bit.
I hope that gives some background to your question, Joan. And then there was one from Constance. Do you have thoughts on how this kind of activity could scale beyond a single institution? It relies on a single shared system. That's true. And what would integration with bibliographic archival from UChicago's Library Regenstein collections entail? And yes, this is a great question. That's something that the Digital Collections Manager group, once we meet again, this is something to talk to them about. There is something at the Regenstein called, I believe it's called Luna. I was just reading about Lux at Yale, so I'm probably gonna mess this up, but Luna, where they will accept sort of small, not even small, but larger digital collections of photographs and publish those through the UChicago Library server website. And so they're creating digital collections to share, and sort of they're a repository for other institutions or departments around campus. So that is also something we're looking into, especially as we move forward and can have a larger sort of comprehension of groupings of our photographs and how they might best be shared with the Regenstein. I think there was just those two that I saw here. I see one more question here in the Q&A from Bridget Nolan. Do you think your creators to external sources like ULOC or Wikidata? If not, is this something you're thinking about doing in the future? Yes, we don't, and it is something that I would like to try to do. I know also our research archivist is interested in this. So yeah, it is something we're thinking about doing in the future, and just trying to find the right sort of support and understanding of how we can do that. But yes.
And I have two people with their hands up. So I'm going to unmute Matthew if you'd like to ask a question. Oh, it says that you'll need to unmute yourself. I'm sorry. It says allow it, but I.
Problem.
Oh, okay. Then there's another individual, Maureen. You should be able to talk if you unmute. Okay. Let's being told there's more coming in the Q&A here, so.
Yeah, okay. So another question from Joan, and just Maureen, if you're able to put your question in the Q&A, if you can't unmute, that's also great. Do you worry about the loss of images because of the format change? I guess I'd be curious about which format change that specifically, and maybe another detail is that we currently house our digital images in 2 places. So this is going to be something we're going to have to think about. So the shift to the database, they're stored there as a JPEG and on our supplementary tab as a TIFF. And then both of those things are also stored in our museum archives server. So, and then changing of, yes, photographic formats is something that we're thinking about on larger scale, because we have so many departments have so many of these formats. So I don't have a great answer for you. Oh, analog to digital. We are not too worried about that unless there's a preservation issue with the photograph, where the physical analog photograph can't be preserved. But the analog to digital currently isn't too much of a concern, just because we are able to keep those analog negatives, whether they're glass plate or film negatives. And we're also applying for grants to try to do a large scale digitization of those, while also getting a refrigeration unit for any that are in really, really bad shape. But yeah, so far, that's sort of a stable transition right now. Oh, Maureen.
And I do see another question from Constance. I know that you're looking at them too. So it's the apologies if I missed this in the beginning part of the presentation. Are you ingesting archival descriptions from an existing or external system like ASpace, or excuse me, ArchiveSpace or something like that at OI in the IDB?
We're not ingesting things from an external system into the IDB. This is the cataloging process from physical archival object to the database. I think that's an answer to your question. Please follow up if it's not, but no, this isn't like a collection of information that's being moved into the IDB. The issue, which is different from the other departments that we have, they were sort of ingesting previous databases into the IDB, but the history of the archives, like I said, it's about 40 years old, and there was no systematic sort of catalog up until about 6 years ago. So it was, the Institute had one archivist who had his own sort of analog system of organization. And so this is all sort of active cataloging, what has been done, except for ingesting the digital images into the database, which exist on the server.
Maureen did come through on the Q&A. So says, have you looked at JSTOR Forum as a model? They are linking art stores' images to the journals in their collections.
No, that's a great suggestion. So I'm just gonna write this down. So thank you.
And Joan made
That would be
another
interesting.
comment about the analog to digital. Comment was, in the past, analog materials were there when faculty retired or passed away, and digital images are less visible. Perhaps that was part of that analog to digital concern.
That makes sense. Yeah, the analog materials are available. Yeah, always available. And we're trying to make those digital images more visible. So yes, the sort of, we call it the digital archive, but it was sort of the previous archivist, though there wasn't a comprehensive catalog, he was amazing at digitizing things for many decades. So we do have what we call sort of our digital catalog, but it's on the server, and yeah, we ingest that as in as organized fashion as we can into the IDB. But yes, it is a process of making all of that digital material more visible. Also, just that legacy issue of having to catalog the archive now that it is in a more centralized location, which I know this happens in archives across the board, but archaeological archives seem very interesting and specific to me, in that when an excavation ends, it could be going on for 10 years. Then things go into people's offices so they can write their publication, and then things like finally come into the archive either all at once or in pieces. So it is sort of this juggling act specific to the publication rhythm. But that's just to say that because of that, yeah, cataloging process, we've tried to make a map of the physical archive as well. So it's usually down to the box level or the folder level as opposed to our item level. So these digital images are really our most robust foray into item level visibility online. Let me just see if there's anything more in the Q&A.
I see a couple of thank yous in there. There's another hand up for a second. Okay. There was a hand up from Stephen, excuse me. If you unmute, you should be allowed to ask your question now, or be able to.
Hi there. That was accidental.
Okay.
Tried to type it in there.
Thanks, Stephen.
Apologize. Thank you for the presentation. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
You have 2 more minutes. If there are any further questions, did I miss anything?
We'd also be really interested in just if anyone has tried to do something similar, has sort of similar experiences in this process, or anything that you've figured out along the way, that would be wonderful. Any comments?
Yeah, now saying that, I'll go ahead and make a plug for, there is a channel in Slack for this session. So if you have any of those types of comments and you're thinking, well, 1 more minute is not enough to explain my idea to the presenters, feel free to head over there and drop that information in for Ling and for Anne. Were there any more questions? Anything right now? One more plug, if you can't think of it at this very second, you can always go over to the Slack channel and ask those questions over there, or have that discussion.
Yeah, or email us directly if 2 weeks from now or in the future you think of something.
Very kind of you. Very kind of you. Okay. Well, it feels like a reasonable time to go ahead and wrap this up. So I'll say thank you to everyone for joining our discussion today, or enjoying this great presentation, great information, asking the questions. It's great to see everyone here. And we hope to see you at more sessions. We have another day left. So join us for some more LD4 2022. Thanks again, Anne. Thank you, Ling.
Thank you.
Talk to you later.
Thank you. Bye.